Senator from North Carolina.
Mr. President, thank you. Mr. President, I come to the floor today. I'm ultimately going to be offering unanimous consent for the body. But beforehand, I want to talk a little bit about what happened in North Carolina with the storm of Hurricane Helene. It actually starts a couple of days earlier when a weather system came into western North Carolina and dumped inches and inches of rain on more than a dozen major river basins and saturated the land. Now we have Hurricane Helene come in through the Florida Panhandle, through Georgia, up through South Carolina, and into North Carolina. It largely maintained the integrity of a Category 1 storm, tropical storm, a couple of 100 miles inland in a mountain range. It's a first-of-a-kind storm that is the most deadly in North Carolina history. And folks, we've been hit by Florence, Matthew, Hugo. I can go through a long list. Over 102 people dead, some still missing. We have families that are, disconnected and will likely not even have electricity. There's a community called Bid Creek. Asheville is without drinkable water today. Businesses are suffering. The Small Business Administration is out of money. They are telling people who have had claims processed that your claim has been approved, and as soon as the federal government replenishes the Small Business Administration account, then they will get the money. Think about that. If you're one of thousands of people in western North Carolina in a landmass the size of the state of Massachusetts, ladies and gentlemen, that is how big the landmass was that had devastating storms, 102 people die, hundreds of businesses out of business. I've got a 20-mile segment of I-40 that is impassable. And it's not from rock slides, it's because the land underneath the roads no longer exists. There are 5 miles that are going to have to be repaired, and 20 years ago, when we had a 3/10 of a mile segment, it took 7 months to repair it, and that was just removing a landslide. The integrity of the roadbed was there. We don't have that anymore. We have 80 miles of rail tracks gone. We have hundreds of businesses out of business right now. We have a major water system that hopes to have drinkable water by Christmas. We have people suffering. We have businesses suffering. We have a disaster that we have to respond to, and a lot of work is going to have to be done before the end of this Congress, and certainly in the next Congress when the nearly $50 billion between state and federal dollars is going to have to be appropriated just to help North Carolina, not to mention the $3 billion of agricultural damage in Georgia, and I can go down the list of Florida. We've got a lot of work to do, but folks, this is a time where you don't question what we're doing. You don't question how you pay for it. You get the money there and you get these communities back on track. I'm not saying that we shouldn't be paying for this. We absolutely should. And up here in the rarefied air of Washington, D.C., we could say, well, let's just, be responsible about this and let these people suffer until we get it. But that's not how it works in western North Carolina. They need help now, today. And I'll talk a little bit more about that before I offer my unanimous consent request. But before I do, if I may, Mr. President, I'd like to pass it over to Senator Budd, and I believe Senator Budd will pass it over to Senator Warner, and then I would like to reserve recognition at that time.
Mr. President. Senator from North Carolina.
So I want to thank my friend and Senator Tillis for his partnership, not just for today, but throughout this whole crisis in our state. Hurricane Helene, it represents one of the worst natural disasters ever to happen to our state, in particular western North Carolina. More than, as he mentioned, 100 people were killed, hundreds more injured, and some are still missing. Thousands of North Carolinians, they lost their homes and their family businesses. And every day that I was present in the region, I was stunned by the enormity of the damage. It's unlike anything that I've ever seen. Now, I went to college at App State, or Appalachian State in Boone, and you learn very quickly how tough these mountain folks are. They're proud, they're self-sufficient people. And the citizens of western North Carolina, they're some of the toughest, most resilient people around. They don't look for handouts, they don't complain, So when there's a need like this, government needs to be ready and needs to be there to help them. They've got to be able to access the loans from the SBA so that they can continue to rebuild and recover their communities. Now, this program provides victims with low-interest loans to replace lost property or to rebuild their businesses or their homes or their shops. This is very important because very few Helene victims, they don't have flood insurance. And it covers anything that covers a disaster of this magnitude. Now, it's critical that this program be funded and effectively managed to get loan dollars flowing to those in need immediately. But as my colleague mentioned, the SBA announced on October 15th that it ran out of money. Now, every day that this fund sits empty, it further slows the process of rebuilding the lives for thousands of North Carolinians. And that's why we're here. We got to replenish it, and we need to do it now. So I stand ready to work with my Senate colleagues to cut through the delays and provide the folks of Western North Carolina, the whole Appalachia region, the resources they need as quickly as possible. So in this spirit, I strongly want to support Senator Tillis's Relief Act to refill the SBA's disaster loan program, and I hope that the Senate can pass it today. I also strongly support the quick approval of a supplemental bill to help fund the long-term recovery for the folks in Western North Carolina. Congress should take up this bill without any further delay, and I either yield to Senator Tillis or Senator Warner.
Mr. President.
Senator from Virginia.
Mr. President, let me thank my friends from North Carolina, Senator Budd and Senator Tillis. And let me acknowledge on the front end, you guys got hit the hardest, but we got hit as well in Southwest Virginia. And we got communities that without this relief are going to die. I want to echo what both my colleagues have said. You know, this Relief Act, it's bipartisan. It is what we do as a matter of course when an entity like the SBA runs out of money. Since October 15th, 34,000 businesses across the country have applied for SBA relief. Response, many of them got approved. But they get a response that says, we'll give you money when Congress does its job. This is done as a matter of course. And frankly, the SBA screwed up a little bit on not getting better numbers before the election. I want to take one moment and tell you about a community in particular in Southwest Virginia. Damascus, Virginia was an old town that basically the economy had disappeared. It came back because there's something called the Creeper Trail. Biking and hiking, I biked this trail. And Senator Tillis, parts of that trail are gone now. 34 radial road trestles, 18 of them are damaged or gone. We've got part of our road that gets to the top of the mountain gone as well. I went to Damascus, went to 10 jurisdictions in Southwest Virginia. But in this little town, every business and home was affected. One guy had 3 businesses, restaurant, bed and breakfast, 2 restaurants and bed and breakfast. He paid out of his pocket to try to keep his workers on, even though it'll be months before anything happens, even if the money was there. We owe it to the folks in Damascus, across Southwest Virginia, in North Carolina, and across all of the jurisdictions in our country that have been hard hit to do our job. Just like folks in Western North Carolina, folks in Southwest Virginia are proud. They had an enormous amount of self-help. But this kind of assistance, whether it's FEMA dollars or SBA loans, is not charity. It is their right as Americans. It's what we pay our taxes for. Instead, literally thousands of Virginians who asked for that right to apply for this loan have gotten a note saying, we can't send you the money until Congress does its job. We have a chance today, through unanimous consent, to take this bipartisan piece of legislation, pass it through, and get those businesses the funds they deserve. And I thank my colleague, and will yield back to the senior senator from North Carolina.
Senator from North Carolina.
233 people dead, 102 in North Carolina, 7 still unaccounted for. Total damage estimated between $30 and $48 billion across 7 states. North Carolina, 1,400 landslides, 6,000 miles of road damage, 1 million plus houses and businesses lost utilities. Some municipalities like Asheville, like I said earlier, may not have drinkable water. This is a major urban center in western North Carolina. May not have drinkable water for tens of thousands of people before the end of August. That includes businesses that are struggling right now. Think restaurants. Struck during the peak of western North Carolina's season. The majority of our revenue occurs in western North Carolina starting in October, ending in November. We've lost that. They're gone. A lot of these people lost loved ones who are businesses. Now they're just trying to keep their business afloat while they're going to funerals. And we tell them, well, we just got to wait for Congress before we can send you a check. Because for the first time in this body, we're going to demand a pay-for disaster recovery. Down about where the pages are sitting, a few months ago, Brian Schatz came to me. He's a senator from Hawaii, and he said, Tom, I hope you'll support me on the supplemental for the fires in Maui. I said, count me in, Brian, because you know what? I have no doubt in them. And count me in every time for a disaster supplemental, because this is when we cut the crap and do our jobs. So count me in, because I'm pretty sure before this season's over, I'm going to have to come to you for help in North Carolina. I had no idea that it was going to be a record-setting deadly storm. But if we want to keep these communities vibrant, Asheville will come back. It has the critical mass. Canton, Clyde, Burnsville, I could list dozens of towns that are hanging in the breach. Let's give them a chance. And if we don't, then businesses are going to make the right business decision. There's two here, okay? We've got the small businesses that hopefully they can bridge the gap and recover. Again, these are also people who have lost loved ones, and many of them lost their own homes. So while they're trying to figure out a place to live, they're all trying to figure out how they can run their business and how they can keep people employed. Now, big businesses are looking at what the business network or what the ecosystem is going to look like. We have major employers who may make the decision to leave if we don't send a signal that we're going to be there to help them recover. I could go on ad nauseum, but I'm telling you, when I tell you it is a crisis in North Carolina, when a major lifeline of I-40 is going to be down for years, I can't tell people just because I don't like the way it gets appropriated, it sucks for you, you may have to go out of business while I try to fix the dysfunction in Washington. This is a time for us to act and do like we have done every time with the disaster supplemental. So, and by the way, in advance, Senator Paul's going to offer an amendment I love so much I'd like to marry it, and I'm also going to object to it because it's the right amendment at the wrong time. I'm looking forward to having that incorporated in a vehicle that my Democrat colleagues are going to hate that I hope we get passed in the next Congress. But there's no time for that now. And I've said that in spite of the fact that I support it, I want to be the one to object to it because I want mission certainty here. My mission is to get this disaster supplemental for the Small Business Administration passed through like we have on every other disaster supplemental to this day. So, Mr. President, as if in legislative session, I ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to immediate consideration of Calendar 465 H.R. 6651. I further ask that the Tillis-Warner substitute amendment at the desk be considered and agreed to. The bill, as amended, be considered read a third time and passed, and that the motions to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table.
Is there objection?
Mr. President,
Senator from Kentucky.
reserving the right to object, I lived for 4 months in Asheville, worked at the VA hospital, still have fond feelings for Western North Carolina. I have an uncle who lives just up the road from Asheville. I know about the devastation. One of my best friends from my wedding lives in Asheville as well. But the thing is the reason why we won't do this in a responsible way is because the Senate voted to send all your money to Ukraine. I mean, they voted to send $200 billion to Ukraine. I've been all over the mountains of Appalachia. When I ask people, would you rather that your senators take care of you here in Asheville or here in Pikeville, here in Appalachia? Would you rather them send your money to Ukraine? I don't get anybody wanting to send a penny to Ukraine. Look, you can have all kinds of sympathy in the world for Ukraine, hostility towards Russia being the aggressor nation, but we don't have the money. We're $2 trillion in the hole. Interest this year is going to be $1 trillion. And as far as passing this, I'm willing to let it pass today. He's going to object to passing his own bill today simply because it gets paid for. How crazy is that? Not even let the other side object to it. He's going to object to his own bill. I'm willing to let the bill pass, but take some of the fluff and boondoggle subsidies from the Green New Deal and put it into here. The money's sitting here. We put it into here for disasters. We help Asheville today. Oh, no, it's not the time nor the place to pay for things. The question before the Senate is whether on behalf of the American people, we should borrow and spend an additional $810 million for small business loans. You know who gets small business loans right now? Ukraine. We're funding, 60 Minutes did a special on this, funding a purse and dress store in Ukraine. We fund the Ukrainian government pensions. Look, half of our state governments are short in pensions. Our U.S. government is short in pensions, and we're funding them in Ukraine. So some of the same people who want this immediately now, we don't want to pay for it, are happy to pay for crap all over Ukraine, including government salaries and pensions and small business loans to Ukraine. You know what? The job of legislators is to make decisions, to set priorities. We don't have an infinite amount of money, but we do have enough money to take care of them in Asheville and in Virginia. Simply pay for it. But realize the people assembled will object to their own bill today. I'm offering their bill. All we got to do is take some money that's laying around in a pot of money, Green New Deal, boondoggle money going to big corporations, and put it in for disaster. We can do that today. You still want to subsidize green energy, come back and do that next year. Pay for it now. We don't have to borrow hundreds of millions of dollars to bail this program out. But Congress has a habit of refusing to do what you and I would do if faced with a new and large expense. Congress refuses to cut elsewhere, even when saying yes to every new spending proposal and programs that has led to record high inflation. Americans have been forced to learn the hard way that they are the ones who have to pay for Congress's addiction to spending. And so I offer a fiscally responsible path to pay for the bill. Spare Americans from increasing the hidden tax of inflation. My amendment would rescind $810 million from the Department of Energy's boondoggle green new energy deals. It's a $4.75 billion program that has had repeated bankruptcies in it previously. It's absurd to force taxpayers to subsidize rich companies with vast resources of their own to gamble on energy projects that the private sector finds too risky. And actually, it should be about priorities. The people in Asheville or the Green New Deal? No, this is the best time to put them in contrast, not some other time when people are not hurting, when people can't see the contrast. Everybody in Asheville should wake up today and find out their senators are going to reject the disaster money because it's paid for. That's it. They're going to reject taking it from the Green New Deal boondoggle and sending it to Appalachia. It can go today. It can go in 10 minutes. I approve of the money. Just take it from somewhere where it's being wasted. Ideally, I'd take it from Ukraine, but that's not available right now. But a lot of the money went to Ukraine also. A 2015 report from the Government Accountability Office found that when 5 companies defaulted on these Green New Deal loans, the government, the taxpayers, lost $800 million. It's not a good program to begin with, but it's an easy place to go looking for something that is more important, like the people of Asheville and North Carolina. This money would have nearly covered today's disaster loan funding, but was needlessly squandered previously. But there's still money in the fund today. I offered this identical amendment to pay for another bill a month ago, and every Republican voted for it. So I don't understand why Republicans would rise today and object to a pay-for they all voted for last month. If the Small Business Administration must have this additional money, the least we can do is respect the taxpayers and act as good stewards for their money. Therefore, I ask the senator to modify his request to include my amendment, which is at the desk. This would allow the bill to pass if my amendment is attached to it. The amendment be considered and agreed to. The bill as further amended be agreed to, and that the motions to consider be considered made and laid upon the table.
Does the
President.
senator shall modify his request? Senator from North Carolina.
Reserving the right to object, Mr. President. I was wondering if the gentleman from Kentucky would yield for 2 questions. And then I'd like to speak on the...
Does the senator from Kentucky yield?
I think I know the answer to this, Senator Paul, but I just wanted to confirm it. Do you recall how you voted on the PACT Act?
I don't think we have an objection. You know, I've asked for a unanimous consent.
I'd
Either
ask-
objects or he doesn't object.
Does the senator from Kentucky yield?
I thought
I
he
don't
did,
have
Mr.
the
President. I
floor. I've
misunderstood.
made a motion.
And I've reserved the right to object to that motion.
Does
and
the
I've
senator from
subsequently
North
asked the
Carolina
chair-
reject to the
I've subsequently
modification?
asked the chair if the
You've got to
gentleman from
respond to the
Kentucky would
motion.
yield to a
I've made a
request.
motion to pass your bill. You need to respond.
Order in the Senate. This is not debatable. The senator from Kentucky has not agreed to yield.
Then
Senator from North
Mr.
Carolina.
President, reserving the right to object. The question I would have asked him is how he voted on the PACT Act. I don't know the answer to it. I think he voted against it. I'm not sure. The other question I was going to ask him, has he ever voted for a disaster supplemental that wasn't offset? Those were the 2 questions I was going to ask. I'll find it out later on. Look, our state motto is esse quam videre. It says to be rather than to seem. This is a disingenuous offer to amend my bill. Let me tell you why. Maybe it'll even be a fundraising campaign later this week. I'm fighting to dismantle the Green New Deal, and Tillis objected to doing that today. This bill, if it got amended, has no prayer. I came to the Senate to make a difference, not to make a point. I get the point. There are a lot of things in the Inflation Reduction Act and the Green New Deal that need to be clawed back, and I look forward to, under President Trump's leadership, having that vote. I assume that Senator Paul knows how to count votes. He has to know that he doesn't have the votes to get this bill done if it's amended. To be rather than to seem. I'm focused on getting North Carolina back on track and not playing a game on this Senate floor. I'm going to object to this, Mr. President, in a minute because it's a game. We never fund disaster supplementals because we know that people are hurting. You take that case to Ukraine, to Asheville. You take it to Burnsville. You take it to Banner Elk. You take it to Cashiers, Senator Paul, and I'll go with you. And I'll see if they're as worried about that or if they're just worried about making sure that their families have a place to live and their businesses have a chance to survive. Mr. President, I object.
Objection is heard to the modification. Is there objection to the original request?
Reserving the right to object.
Senator from Kentucky.
The insinuation is made that there's a better time. We'll vote on this at another time. Maybe, you know, young men, it's just not the time. It's not the time nor the place. Well, actually, it is the time or the place. And the only vote against the disaster bill today will be the senator from North Carolina. He will today vote to kill the disaster aid. Now, he says, well, there aren't enough votes. We won't know because he's objecting. He isn't allowing the Democrats to object because they always object to anything that's paid for. But by his objection, he's not allowing the system to play out. If Democrats want to object, we'll find out that they're opposed to pay-fors and will further the definition of who's for not paying for stuff and who is. But to say that we as Republicans are never for paying for disaster relief is to say that we are equally, or the Republicans are for this, are equally complicit in the accumulation of $35 trillion worth of debt. So no matter how good the cause is, I don't care whether there's a fire or a tornado or a flood or rain or all the damage, it all should be paid for. It's the responsible thing to do no matter how terrible the disaster is. And it's not like I'm saying, well, let's just wait 2 years until we can earn enough money to pay for Asheville. We have the money. We're a rich country. It's sitting here. I just simply ask, take it from something here that is a wasteful corporate bailout to green energy companies and put it over here. But the fact that the senator from North Carolina is going to kill his own bill today, he's going to vote not to allow it to be heard. We have no idea whether there are enough votes or not. He can say there's not enough votes, but he's now the vote that stops the spending from getting easy passage. What we're going through is a procedure of easy passage. This is allowing things not to go to committee, not to be deliberated, but to easily pass. And I'm in favor of doing that because of the emergency, because of the tragedy. We allow this to easily pass by simply taking some money from a pile of money over here. If you weren't to object and the Democrats don't stand up, it passes like this. But then it's not on me, it's on them. They decide that they don't want to pay for anything and disasters should never be paid for. Well, that's how we have this disaster of a $35 trillion debt, because nobody pays for anything. Nobody cares. It's never the right time. Well, now is the right time. And so if you want easy passage, you have to hear what the problems we face are. So I object.
Objection is
President.
heard. Senator from North Carolina.
Ladies and gentlemen, I've prided myself on working on a lot of legislation over the last 10 years, and I'm proud of the fact that I've figured out how to get votes in this chamber and get votes in the other chamber and get bills to the president's desk. Let me explain to you how this process works. We are going to pass a bill out of here, and even if it's not funded, I am pretty sure that the House is going to insist on some sort of a pay for it. What we're doing here is playing a game and being disingenuous. Folks, I support what Senator Paul does. And by the way, I'll be checking the fundraising emails to see if we're fighting that Tillis is against the Green New Deal dismantling. Count me in for that. What I'm not for is putting a poison pill in here that prevents this bill from going to the House. My colleagues in the House intend to get a pay for. They intend to get a pay for. I mean, how hard is it? I've got a community college education, and I'm smart enough to figure this out. So are a lot of other people from community colleges. But this is a game. It will be paid for in the House, or it won't pass. We have a majority there. So instead of facilitating the process to move it there and us find a way to offset it, we're trying to kill it here. I support so many provisions of the Inflation Reduction Act and the American Rescue Plan being repealed and using the money for better purposes, and disaster recovery is one of them. But that's not what we're here to do today in this Congress with that president. That's what we're going to be here to do next year in the next Congress with a different president. So I just want to set the record straight. I don't like games being played, and my colleagues on the other side of the aisle know I try to be even-handed. I told Mark Warner, Senator Warner, I was going to object because it was a procedural game. And if it's characterized as anything other than that, let me know who you are, because I will educate you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President,
Senator from
will
Virginia.
the senator yield for a question?
Senator yields.
Yeah, I'm back to happy Tom now.
Just want to say, I was prepared to object as well. But is it not the case, particularly when it comes to SBA? Frankly, if SBA had gotten their act together a little earlier and had a better accounting, so we knew how much needed to refill the pot, we might not have been here. But this is, we want to change the law about how the SBA operates in disaster relief. That's a fair debate, and I'll take on anyone in this chamber. But in the meantime, whether it's in your community or mine, people are sitting there with a piece of paper that says, you'll get your loan, you've been approved, once Congress does its job. Would not your bill, my bill, our bipartisan bill, if it had been able to go through today, wouldn't those folks in North Carolina, Virginia, who and across our country have been hit, be one step closer, those small businesses, to get the SBA loans that they've earned, deserved, and should be funded?
Without a doubt, Senator Warner, and quite honestly, there are some people today saying, if I've got to wait till next Congress, I got to fold up. I'm trying to find a place to live, and I'm also trying to keep my business afloat. Absolutely. It gives them hope, and our failure to act doesn't.
I yield.